Hello everyone, it is I, the Witch of Paint, back yet again with another Zodiac fairy. Today we are going to paint a fairy based on the Zodiac sign Virgo, represented by the Virgin, because Virgo is Latin for virgin, which is also why in German we call this Jungfrau, the sign. This sign goes from around the 23rd of August until around about the 22nd of September, and apparently this sign is also ruled by the planet Mercury again, which we have had before for the Gemini fairies, and I had struggled a little back then with the planet, but because we've already had it, I decided that since we already had it basically, that the Mercury in this painting is going to be just a small detail in the background, and I would focus a little bit more on the other surroundings of this fairy, the other environment, which would be a little forest scene, and I wanted the fairy to sit upon a mushroom with a bunch of other mushrooms behind her going up a tree kind of thing. The most colourful thing in this painting will of course be the fairy herself. She's going to be wearing a dress that was inspired by painted daisies, which are flowers that look like the name, painted daisies, so daisies that have been painted with colour. They are really pretty flowers, and I just kind of had to use them for the dress because it's just like, they look absolutely gorgeous. So the skirt and the sleeve area, kind of neck area, would be made of these painted daisy design flowers. And this fairy would also be holding some wheat in one of her hands, which is something that is also associated with the sign. Aside from the Virgin, the harvest season is about to start, so a lot of pictures and images you're going to see of Virgo are going to be having wheat involved in there somewhere, or at least something that would represent harvesting. Other than that, we will have some trees in the background, some wheat plants in the left corner because, harvest season, as I've just said. And in the end, I'll add the constellation of Virgo above her and paint the little symbol that represents Virgo on a mushroom next to the fairy. I wasn't sure where else to put the sign, so that's where it went in the end. Now that we have established the idea of this painting, let's dive into the myths behind the Virgin that represents Virgo. And this time, instead of having just one myth to talk about, there are many different myths and mythological figures that can be associated with the zodiac sign of Virgo. Because people just like maidens and virgins, apparently, in their myths. Anyways, for example, there is Astraea, the virgin goddess of justice, innocence, purity, and precision. She is the daughter of Astraeus and Eos and lived with humans during, the Stone Age, but during the Iron Age she decided to flee from mankind's evilness and became the constellation Virgo. She was the last goddess to have left Earth and humanity, which is why then the constellation of Virgo ended up being associated with the element Earth. Depending on what mythology you look at, or generally what Greek or Roman myth you are reading, there are many different origins for Virgo. Sometimes the sign is related to Demeter, the goddess of harvest, which makes sense because harvest is the season that is starting now, and that is where Virgo is. But Demeter isn't really a virgin. I mean, a maiden, maybe. Or is maid and virgin interchangeable? I'm not going to risk it anyway. The other goddess that could be associated with it would be her daughter Persephone, at least, in Greek or Roman mythology. Persephone being the queen of the underworld, and because of the things that happened between her and Hades, she's only staying above the world during the springtime, and then she goes to the underworld to rule with her husband Hades, and that makes Demeter sad. So winter starts coming in, which also makes sense in the seasonal shift we're about to have, even though here in Ireland things have just been rainy a lot. I mean, there have been colourful flowers and green leaves, but like weather-wise, I don't think there's much of a difference between this time of the year and winter and autumn, because it was just as rainy. In all of these months, at least it feels like it was. There were warm days, of course, but anyways. There are also some myths that associate Virgo with Parthenos, the daughter of Staphylos and Chrysothemis. She's the sister to Rheo and Molpadia. Rheo had previously been put in a box and thrown into the sea when her dad discovered she was pregnant and unmarried, and he didn't know it was Apollo's child, so he just tossed her into the sea and left her to... But that's not important to this. Parthenos and Molpadia have lived in fear of their father ever since, and after accidentally breaking one of his wine bottles that they were supposed to watch, they fled the town and jumped off a cliff. But don't worry, because their sister has been dating Apollo a little bit. Apollo decided to save them, and they each became local goddesses in different towns. Molpadia in Castabos, where she changed her own name to Hemitea, and Parthenos settled in Bubastis. Then there is the Greek myth of the Athenian maiden Erigone, which is a little bit more disturbing, at least to me, so I'm not going to be talking about it here. If you really want to know about a rather tragic story, the Virgo article is down below, or you can just research her yourself, I suppose. In either case, in Egyptian mythology, the harvest season begins when the sun moved through the constellation of Virgo, which I'm pretty sure most people on Earth agree with. It's like, because this time is always when the harvest season begins, at least for certain crops. So essentially, Virgo is associated with the harvest and a bunch of different virgins and maidens from mythologies. Although Demeter isn't exactly a virgin anymore, considering she does have at least Persephone as a child, either way, it is associated with many women throughout mythology. And if that's a rabbit hole you'd like to throw yourself into, I'll leave some articles down below. Now, let's talk a little bit about the painting itself. I had such a struggle getting the pose of a fairy to look right in the sketch, to a point where I was starting to ruin the paper a little bit, because I was sketching, erasing, and sketching, and erasing, and resketching, and erasing, and resketching so many times. It's not that noticeable in the end, I think, but in the beginning it was very apparent that some of the paper was starting to get some damage, at least. Overall, I'm not completely happy with the pose. I think it looks a little weird because her legs are angled, but her body is facing straight on. In the end, doesn't really matter because it looks better than what I had at the start. I don't draw sitting people that much, that's why I struggled a little bit with this, with the perspective especially, and getting the arms to look right. Like, I'm pretty sure a lot of the times I was just drawing them too long, or just angled in a weird way, and I wasn't sure what I was doing anymore, so I just straight on body, legs just slightly angled. Maybe she's just turned her body a little bit, I don't know. In the end it looks okay, and that's all I'm going to have with this. I need to draw sitting people more often. Eventually I stopped reworking the pose because, as I said, paper got damaged, and because I didn't want to waste all of this paper, I decided to just keep going with the painting and just be very careful around the area where the paper was getting damaged. So I brought out my waterproof ink and I outlined my fairy. But only the fairy. I didn't want to outline the background because the main focus of this painting is the fairy herself. The very pretty fairy, if I do say so myself. For the painting itself, I used my Van Gogh watercolour paints again. Yes, I know, I use them a whole lot. Should probably switch it up again soon because my other palettes are not getting any attention in most of these videos, and I kind of feel like I should probably get back to using them. Anyways, I laid out the basic colours that I wanted for the background. First, the sky, I started with some phthalo blue and put some indigo on the top of it. Then I ended up using so many different greens and blues for the grass and background trees that I am no longer really sure what I used exactly. One of the turquoise blues, definitely. I used a lot of hooker green deep as well, but then I used so many of the other green tones at random without really paying a lot of attention to which one I was using, that I can't really tell you which greens exactly I used for all of the green things in the painting. For the tree trunks I used burnt sienna, I think. I don't really remember exactly which brown I used, and I haven't written it down again. I really need to start doing that. For the fairy, I painted her wings and her hair in permanent lemon yellow first, being very careful in the areas where the paper was starting to come apart because it was hitting some of the wings. I also ended up painting the flower parts of her dress in yellow first. And then later went over some of the parts that I wanted to be more red in Madeleine Deep and Carmine for the shadows, I think. For the middle part of her dress, I mixed a dark brownish shade using permanent light red, Madeleine Deep, and I think it was hooker green deep. This was supposed to kind of represent the middle of the painted daisies, which is a pretty dark shade of brown. So that's my thought process behind that. Plus it makes the colourful parts of a dress stand out a little bit more. I used a similar shade for the mushroom tops, although that was more of a reddish brown, which I had picked up from my palette, so I have no idea what colours it was mixed out of, because it was left over from some other painting. It was probably just a collection of different colours that just flowed into each other, because that part of the mixing palette is tilted, so I don't know for sure if it was deliberately mixed or if it was just colours flowing down into that little area there. In either case, I try to make the mushrooms closest to us, so the ones that she's sitting on and the ones immediately around her, more detailed than the ones that were on the top of the tree where the branches were separating. So essentially, I started with a lot of detail on the bottom, and then on top I just kind of dotted in the browns to kind of indicate that there are more mushrooms up there, but I wasn't going to put so much detail into something so tiny because I also don't have the brushes and sizes for that much detail anyways. As for the skin tone of the fairy, I decided to keep it light because I didn't want to work too much on top of the area that was broken, and her arm was really, all of it was in the damaged area, her right hand arm. So I used a mix of yellow ochre, burnt sienna and carmine, as is my normal way of mixing skin tones. Then to finish off the painting, I added the constellation of Virgo in the sky in a nice metallic silver watercolour and added some golden stars around it. I decided not to go with a splattering method and just dotted it around deliberately because I didn't want any of the gold to go onto the trees, and I wasn't sure how I was going to block off the areas I didn't want stars on, so I just did it deliberately with my brush. And then I had the great idea, I think, to use my metallic watercolours to cover up the areas of the paper that were damaged, at least a little bit. So I took some of the light gold colour and the iridescent yellow from the Van Gogh metallic watercolour set to paint over the wings a little bit, but also keep the shading, obviously, which is why I used two shades of yellow metallics. Well, one was gold and the other was yellow. You get what I mean. I also put a little bit of the metallic colours into her hair, just to add some nice highlights into her lovely braid, which I haven't even mentioned yet. It was supposed to mirror like the wheat plants that she's holding a little bit. It was supposed to have like that element in there. That's why she's got the braid. But I also added a little bit of iridescent red on the skirt a little bit, because I thought, while I've got these out, why not just put these everywhere? Because glitter and shiny things. I like shiny things, and surprisingly, my idea of covering up the errors and mistakes and the damage of a paper with the metallic colours has worked out really well. I also took the metallic colours at the end because I realised I haven't added the little symbol for Virgo yet. So I just quickly grabbed some of the metallic watercolour again and put that in at the end. Sort of an M with a very fun little swirl at the end. I really like that symbol. Anyway, the video is done now, so let's take a look at the final result. I do love this fairy, don't get me wrong, you know. It's just the pose of her is still slightly off to me, but otherwise I think she's very cute. I absolutely love her dress, mainly because I have already fallen in love with the concept of painted daisy flowers. But either way, it looks really nice, and I'm really happy I covered up some of the paper damage because now the painting is looking a lot better because I covered it up a little bit. And I also love how shiny it is because shiny things make me happy, okay? Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, please feel free to give it a like, comment something fun about zodiac signs, and perhaps subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Check out the links to my social medias down below, as well as my Twitch channel if you want to see more of my art and want to see me drawing in real time. And if you're in the mood to just hang out and chat about art and other stuff, why not join my Discord too? The link to that is down in the description below. For the time being, I'm the Witch of Paint, and I shall see you all next Sunday. Bye! Look who's made it to the end of the video. Well done. I'm sure you're here for the outtakes, of which I have many to choose from, so let's see which ones I leave for you here. Have fun! She is the daughter of Astraea. Why am I rolling my eyes? Astraeus. Yeah, Astraeus sounds better. And because of the stuff that happened between her and Hades, not Hermes. The very, very gorgeous fairy, may I say. Not ask, may I say. Heavens!